Well, welcome back to the channel, Old Cars New Van, and in this video I'm going to go through the results of the car auction which I visited recently. If you recall from previous videos on this channel, this was Hampson's classic car auction being held at Bolesworth Castle. Now, it was a really interesting day and there were lots of very interesting vehicles there, but I have picked my top 20. Now, I'm not saying that these 20 cars are necessarily the best cars there, but they represented something that caught my eye, either at the extreme of expense or at the extreme of very low cost. So there's something hopefully for everybody in this video. And it just gives people perhaps an insight who haven't been to a car auction before, what in fact you can pick up to get perhaps into the classic car scene for the first time. So without further ado, we're going to start with the Toyota Celica. Now, this really caught my eye. I thought it was a really clean example, and it's the 25th anniversary edition. Really nice, really straight, good paint on it, minimal wear, and this hammer price was £1,600. What a phenomenal value for money to get into a Japanese classic car scene with this 1997 Toyota Celica. Now, you have to remember that the prices I'm quoting here will always be plus 12.5% hammer price. So £1,600 was the hammer price. You've got to add 12.5% to that for fees. But even so, I felt that represented really good value. Moving on, this caught my eye, the Land Rover Series 3. I mean, you might ask yourself, well, what's special about a Land Rover Series 3? And in some ways, nothing, because they are two a penny. They're good fun, they're a good classic car, but I thought this represented fair value at £4,250. That was the hammer price. It was a tidy example, just about the right level of patina for it to look like a Land Rover. I thought that was good value. What was exceptionally good value, I thought, for the quality of car that you were getting was this Daimler 250. I didn't go looking to buy this Daimler 250. I went looking to buy another car, which I'll come on to a little later. So I was a little bit unprepared to really commit to this. But in hindsight, I should have bought this, I think. It went for £6,000, which I think is just amazing value for the quality of car that you're getting, the condition that it was in. I mean, I'm not sure these photos actually do it justice. I thought it was one of the cleanest cars there, to be honest. And for £6,000, for such engineering, history and quality, I just thought was phenomenal. What was also very good, and I did contemplate buying this, but I didn't in the end, was this Ford Consul Cortina. 1963, clean example, not perfect, but clean example. I like an estate, as you know if you watch this channel. And again, I thought this represented good value at £4,250. I don't think that's a lot for a Ford, because we all know what Ford values are, and we'll come on to that a little later with examples of what Ford values can be. But I thought that represented a good, real classic car entry level purchase. At completely the other extreme, this Ford Mustang Eleanor Tribute was the most expensive car there. Apparently, this particular car used to belong to the footballer Thierry Henry. I don't know if that adds to the value or detracts from the value. Perhaps you'll tell me in the comments, but it's certainly his old car. And this sold for £125,000. I told you there was going to be something for everybody in this list, from one extreme to the other, just a few thousand, or in the case of the Celica, £1,600, all the way up to £125,000. Absolutely incredible. Also, an expensive entry was the 1972 Di Tommaso Pantera. Very nice, very striking, sold for £56,000. Yeah, there's some money about, isn't there? People are buying these things. I mean, it was lovely, but again, you'd have to really want one to shell out £56,000. One car that was expensive, but whose value I feel has slipped a little bit in recent times, was this 1974 Ford Escort Mexico. if you watched the video, you knew I really rated this. I sat in it. I thought it was an amazing car in beautiful condition. And this sold for £40,000. Now, I appreciate £40,000 is an awful lot of money. I'm not trying to disguise that fact. But a few years ago, these were going for a lot more. I think these have slipped. It was interesting that the estimate that was put on this was up to 60,000 quid. And I have seen them go for that sort of money. So I wouldn't pay £40,000 for it, even if I could afford it. But I think it has slipped from its high. And I think this next slide shows the true extent of the value of Fords, really, because both of these barn find Escorts sold for £4,250 each. I think that was really expensive, because by the time you put fees on as well, you're knocking on the door of £5,000, and they were wrecks. I mean, you know, be under no illusion. These are complete basket cases, start again time. And what you were really buying was the paperwork, because they were two-door Escorts. Going down the price scale a little bit, this little convertible Mini. Now, the reason I've included this in my top 20 is not because I thought it was a great example, far from it, but it was to illustrate a very important point. This was a tidy car, other than somebody had done, obviously, a relatively homemade conversion job on it. I'm sure it wasn't homemade. I'm sure a company did do it, but it didn't look factory, and it certainly didn't look top notch. And this little Mini sold for £2,600. And I think this is an important lesson. That car, if it hadn't been messed with, would have sold for more than £2,600. So not only has somebody paid to have it converted, but they've devalued it. I think that's a solitary lesson for us all. Don't modify your cars too much, because you can actually be paying money to take money off your vehicle. A good clean example Mini like that, if it was still a hard top, I would have thought would have made something with a 4 in front of it at least, maybe even 5. So it just goes to show. Now, this Mazda RX-7, again, if you watched the previous video, you knew I really liked this. And yeah, I think it made its money, to be honest. It made £12,500, so it's certainly no bargain. But it just goes to show that really nice Japanese car examples will make their money. Lancia Beta Monte Carlo, 1977, really rare thing, nice condition. I think I commented in the video, I'm not sure about the wheels, but they could be changed. I think this was a bargain. I mean, it's not my cup of tea. I wouldn't have bought it. I was interested to see it because of its rarity. But at £6,750, that's quite a lot of exotica for, you know, under £7,000. I thought that was good value. I'm going to be controversial now. What I didn't think was good value was this Jensen. I know it's the 4-wheel drive, but that paint scheme wasn't original. It hadn't been done particularly well. There was evidence of filler. There was evidence of paint cracking. And it still made £15,750. I thought that was expensive, I'll be honest with you. But obviously, somebody thought that the rarity of the car was worth it. Now, coming a bit more down to earth, and that's the purpose of this video, to show people that there's always something for everybody. 1996 Mitsubishi FTO, excuse me. This was immaculate, if the truth be known. And this sold for £2,250. Now, I know it's not the most exciting car in the world, but they're rare, and it would be an interesting talking point at any Japanese classic car meet, and indeed you could go to any classic car meet in something like that and take part. And 2,250, I thought that was good value. Going to look at some older stuff now, and I think I made a comment in the video that the older stuff can struggle because, of course, those who remember them the first time round sadly are no longer with us. And this beautiful 1957 Vauxhall Velux probably illustrates the point. It was gorgeous, and it sold for just £3,400. it's a crying shame because it should be worth more. It really should. But, as I say, it's a bit of a dying breed, a dying desirability. Now then, the car I went to see, the 1985 Monza. You've got to go in with a hard heart to these sort of things, because obviously if I went in with my normal warm heart, I'd have embraced this because I absolutely love these cars. But being truly critical about it, this particular example wasn't for me. There were some corrosion issues that I found, particularly around the rear window, which was going to be a bit of a nightmare to try and fix. The exhaust system was a dog's breakfast. It had been welded and bished and boshed back together, so you're going to need to put a stainless on that, and they're expensive these days. The hammer price was $9,000, which on paper looks competitive, but when you put the fees on, you're over 10. And I do believe that you'd be better off spending a little bit more and getting a really, really good one, rather than trying to save a couple of £1,000 and then having to fix all the problems that you might be buying with something like this. So I hope it goes to a good home. I hope it deserves its future, but it wasn't for me. So I ended up not bidding. Well, I did bid, but I didn't bid as high as £9,000, so I missed it. But I'm glad I missed it. I've got no regrets. 1988 Ford Escort 1.6 GL. This had to be the tidiest car in the show. It was just immaculate. It had done 17,000 miles from new. That's it. It was like new. It was like looking at a car in 1988 in a Ford main dealer. Extraordinary. £7,250. I mean, that's, strong money for one of those, but I think it was worth it all day long for the condition and the mileage and the history. Absolutely superb. Again, going down the price scale a little bit for the next couple of examples. 1970 Triumph Spitfire, £3,000. I thought that was good value. The guy who'd owned it last had owned it for over 40 years. It was his first car. Absolutely extraordinary. So for the history alone, I think 3,000 is a fair price, but the condition was also perfectly reasonable. It wasn't Concours, it wasn't immaculate, but it was a good example, and I think that represented good value for somebody. 1981 Chevette, very rare, particularly in saloon, £2,200. Again, not the most immaculate example. If you look closely at this still shot along the bottom of the door, you can probably get an inkling that round the edges things are not quite as they were back in 1981. But even so, it wasn't falling apart. It wasn't a complete basket case. So for 2,200 for such a rare old beast as that, I felt that represented good value. Now, the next lot that I've included only because I'm so pleased for whoever was selling it. I think I expressed in the video my concern of selling a 1961 Ford Zodiac with no reserve, because just like the Vauxhall beforehand, the appeal of these sort of cars is diminishing because those who remember them are sadly no longer with us. And it made £8,750. I'm so pleased because that's, about where I think it should be. I'm so glad it didn't go for 3,000 or something silly like that, because it really was a lovely car. Now, to round off in my top 20, and this is all in no particular order, just an example of how you can spend just a little bit of money to get something that will always be a talking point. This 1952 Austin A40 Somerset. Is it a perfect example? Of course not. You can see on the bumpers there corrosion. You can see around the edges that it needs some, tender loving care and ideally a repaint. But you wouldn't have to repaint it if you just wanted to run it as a bit of a, rough example. It was perfectly okay. And this sold for just over £1,000. £1,100. It was the hammer price. What a great cheap way to get into classic car ownership and to be proud to turn up at any classic car show. So there we go, folks. Those are my top 20. Not top 20 are necessarily the top 20 cars in the show, but there was something interesting to say about all of them. Thanks ever so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this, something a bit different. And please join the channel again for our next classic car show. The season's upon us now, so we'll be out there filming cars for your delight and delectation. So please like and subscribe, and see you very soon. Thanks a lot.